being here today on this gloomy day. My name is Penny Wright. We're delighted to have you all here on the day before Veterans Day, 2015. Some months ago, we were having a conversation, I believe it was with Katherine Addleman, and the idea of having them, Katherine and Kate Hurney, come here to perform a concert that was related to World War I came up. We thought it was a fitting and appropriate idea, and so we're delighted to have this happening today. It's my pleasure to introduce Kate Hurney and Katherine Addleman. Please welcome them.
So our concert is in Flanders Fields, and it's subtitled "The Great War," and it could be, and the music and poetry of the Great War, but it's also about the people who wrote the music and poetry of the Great War. A lot of the people that we think of as sort of living a rarefied life were very involved in the war, so you'll meet a lot of them. So it was an absolutely terrible war, as you know, and this decade was sort of the beginning of the 20th century. You know, it was almost as if the 20th century started in 1910 with the Armory Show, Proust, Freud, in music, Stravinsky's Writer's Screen. It was like a lot of, you know, very groundbreaking things happened in that generation. And the war started with the invasion of Belgium and the declaration of war against Germany, and it provoked a huge patriotism. And it was a very idealistic patriotism. They said, we're going to go, it's going to be the war to end wars, and we'll be home by Christmas. And of course, that's not what happened. And it got a tremendous response from the intellectuals, the artists. And so our first one is George Butterworth, who was a product of Eton and Oxford. And he was just starting a reputation as a composer. And we don't have much of his music because before he went to the war, he burned everything he thought he didn't want people to know. And he was killed, I believe, at the Somme in 1916. And of course, the Shropshire Lad was something that was in a lot of the rucksacks.
And lads in their hundreds to London come into the fair. There's men from the guard and the forge and the mill and the fold. The lads for the girls and the lords for the liquor are there. unfortunate fellows that now you can never discern. And then one would talk with them friendly and wish them farewell, and watch them depart on the way that they will not return. But now you could stare as you like, and there's nothing to scan, and scratching your elbow and guess at a note to be told. They carry that right to the coiner, the mintage of man, the lads that will die in their glory and never be old.
Strangely enough, it was quite a thriving time for musical theater and musical comedy. Perhaps it just raised people's spirits. And there was a very big hit called Choo Chin Chow, where that was the first stop for the soldiers on leave. And then the second most popular, with 1,300 performances, was Maid of the Mountains. And it was written by a man named Harold Fraser Simon, who is, again, received the Legion d'Honneur for his efforts in the war. And this was the era of Frimmel and Victor Herbert, when people wrote operettas about exotics, gypsies, street people, and these people are brigands, and they're about to be taken over, disbanded, and one of them, the Maid of the Mountain, Teresa, is captured, and she is very defiant of her captors.
Oh, captive soul, you say, I might be rich and free, if I would not betray the friends who trust in me. Vain is the web your cunning weaves, what care I for reward reprise, for bride or friend, oh, don't forget, there's honor among thieves.
Mr. Brigham is over, he says, it's no problem, he'll be an opera singer. So, this was a great time for poetry. This was a time when people read poetry, when they knew poetry by heart, and there was an amazing constellation of poets. And it's almost hard to read them, you know, what they endured, that they were in the trenches. I won't go into it, but it's really horrible what they endured, and the death roll was very high. So these are two poems, one by Rupert Brooke, who was sort of a beautiful young man, and this is at the beginning of the war, when people still had the dreams that, you know, it was going to be sort of a rout and they'd be back. And the second is by Sassoon, who by now, 1917, has been in the trenches. He's had a terrible time, and he's one of the people, if you've read any of the Pat Barker books, if you've read the Pat Barker books, he's one of the characters in these books. He was very damaged by the war. So the first is called The Soldier. If I should die, think only this of me, that there's some corner of a foreign field that is forever England. There shall be in that rich earth a richer dust concealed, a dust whom England bore, shaped, made aware, gave once her flowers to love, her ways to roam, a body of England's breathing English air, washed by the rivers, blessed by the suns of home. And think this heart, all eagle shed away, a pulse in the eternal mind, no less gives somewhere back the thoughts by England given. Her sights and sounds, dreams happy in her day, and laughter learned her friends, and gentleness in hearts at peace under an English heaven. And this is by Sassoon, written after a particularly horrible thing he saw. And it's called, sure. I'm back again from hell, with loathsome thoughts to sell, secrets of death to tell, and horrors from the abyss. Young faces bleared with blood, sucked down into the mud. You shall hear things like this, till the tormented slain crawl round, and once again, with limbs that twist awry, moan out that brutish pain as the fighters pass them by. For you, our battles shine with triumph half divine, and the glory of the dead kindles in each proud eye. But a curse is on my head that shall not be denied, and the wounds in my heart are red, for I have watched them die. So now we're into France, and of course that's where a lot of the fighting took place. And the day that war was declared, France was really shut down. They requisitioned the taxis, the buses, anything that moved was used to take people to the front. And Debussy, as you'll hear in this song, was not in the war. He was actually, in 1918 he died, and this is the last song he wrote. But he was very upset by the war. And Ravel, who we think of as so elegant, was turned down. He wanted to be in the infantry. He was turned down because he was too slim. And he had a shattering experience as an ambulance driver in the motor corps. And the surprising composer is Rinaldo Hahn, who we always see in lovely little velvet jackets and shoes with, you know, well-shined pom-poms on them or something. And he was considered the darling of the salon. He volunteered, he was in the infantry, and he didn't write any music during the war because he was so active as a soldier, and he was a great help and used his music in the hospitals and to soothe. And also there were people who were really traumatized by the war. And there's a lot in Proust about his sympathy for Rinaldo Hahn. But this is a little thing that Ravel wrote about Saint-Saëns, because Ravel thought everybody should be in war. They tell me that Saint-Saëns announces to the avid crowd that during the war he has composed theater music, songs, an elegy, and a piece for trumpets. if instead he had been serving howitzer, his music might have been the better for it.
Yeah.
Nous n'avons plus de maison. Les années ont tourné, tourné, tourné jusqu'à notre petit lit. Ils ont brûlé les camps et notre maître aussi. Ils ont brûlé l'église et les églises églises. Et le pauvre qui n'a pas pu s'en aller. Nous n'avons plus de maison. Les ennemis ont tourné, tourné, tourné jusqu'à notre petit lit. Bien sûr, papa est à la guerre, pauvre maman est morte. Avant d'avoir dit tout ça, qu'est-ce que l'on peut faire? Noah, petit Noah, n'allez pas Jésus, n'allez plus jamais Jésus, essayez. Vengez les enfants de France, les petits neiges, les petits cerfs et les petits grenadiers qui nous ont oubliés par les surtout, pas de joujou, tâchez de nous redonner le pain quotidien. Nous n'avons plus de maison. Les ennemis ont tourné, tourné, tourné jusqu'à notre petit lit. Ils ont brûlé ces camps et notre maître aussi. Ils ont brûlé l'église et les églises Christ. Et le pauvre qui n'a pas pu s'en aller. Oh, écoutez-nous, nous n'avons plus de petits sabots. Regardez la victoire triomphante de France.
The sad thing is, of course, that song could be written about Serbia today or anywhere.
So I'm going to play a very short piece by Rinaldo Hahn. And Kate said a few things about him. He was a child prodigy born in Caracas, Venezuela. Very strange family combination. His mother was a Spanish Basque origin. His father was a German Jewish inventor and engineer. And they were very upper echelon society in Venezuela. But then the government got a little unstable, and they came to Paris. And he was admitted to the Paris Conservatoire at the age of 10, a great prodigy, already publishing songs. And he wrote a lot, and I didn't know anything about him until this program was being put together. He wrote a lot of songs, a lot of piano music, orchestral music, choral music, and he was a very, very close friend of Proust, as Kate mentioned. They were lovers for a while, but stayed friends for their whole lives. At one point, Proust said that everything that he had ever done was thanks to Rinaldo, so they were very close. And I will just play this one, probably one of the things that he would play for the soldiers to comfort them as they were going to the front. He worked his way up to corporal in the French army and had very traumatic experiences as well.
Mademoiselle from Armentières, Parlez-vous. A lot of them are about the fact that Americans don't speak other languages and they think people who do are below them or something. When Yankee Doodle learns to parlez-vous français, goodbye France. Hinky Dinky Parlez-vous, oh Frenchie, wee wee Marie, and then there's some, they're not about the language. Oh, what a lovely war. Sister Susie's sewing shirts for soldiers. Belgium put the kibosh on the Kaiser. And my favorite is Irving Berlin, which is, and they were all out of step but Jim. So this is a French song, Le Madelon, and it was very well known. A marching song.
So Kate mentioned that Ravel had served not as a soldier, but he was a nurse's aide actually at one point and drove a truck and an ambulance at the front. He was very, very affected by the war, and many of his friends died at the front. During the war, he had been writing a suite of dances called Tombeau de Couperin, which was supposed to be an homage to Couperin, one of the great French composers, of course. And so he wrote this piece also as a suite of dances, and each of the 6 dances in the suite is dedicated to one of his close friends who was killed at the front. So I'm just going to play you one called the Minuet. I think it's the Minuet. And it was dedicated to a friend named Jean Dreyfus, whose mother looked after Ravel after he was demobilized. His own mother had died during the war.
of a race. Like Wagner had been the mainstay of the Met. They did, Italian operas in German. They did all kinds of things in German, particularly Wagner. And of course, they didn't do that anymore. And Beethoven was about to be next. And even German people like Karl Muck, who was actually Swiss, I believe, was the conductor of the Boston Symphony. And because the symphony had refused to play the Star Spangled Banner somewhere, and they thought it was because of Muck, that he ended up in an internment camp in Georgia until 1919 when he was deported. And he was considered, a great musician. So Alban Berg was in the army. Of course, he said it was, well, he had a nervous breakdown. I mean, I know that's not a very technically correct term, but that's what they called it at the time. And he said, it was the most terrible thing that ever happened to him, but he did use it to write, as material for Wozzeck. So we're not going to do Wozzeck, but this is a song from one of the 7 early songs. It's written just before the war. I don't think he would have written this after.
Very short segment of Histoire de Soldat by Stravinsky. He wrote this during the war, and it was first performed in 1918. And the story of Histoire de Soldat, there's 4 characters, the devil, of course, the soldier, narrator, and then there's a non-speaking part for the princess, who's a dancer. And very quickly, the story is that the soldier's violin gets stolen, tricked away from him by the devil. He plays a game of cards against the devil and wins his violin back. Then there's a bedridden princess whose father, the king, has said that if anyone can get his daughter out of bed, he'll have her hand in marriage. So he, of course, goes and plays his violin, and she starts dancing. So this little waltz is the princess dancing out of bed. In the end, he does win the princess's hand this way. He has a wonderful life. He lives in the palace. He's a prince. And then, of course, the devil gets him in the end. So this is Stravinsky's take on Histoire de Soldat.
So Vienna not only has a great musical history with people like Schubert and Mozart and Haydn and whatever, but it also has a huge, a history of wonderful songs about Vienna. Maybe if there were 100 great songs about Cleveland or something. Yeah. So this song, Wien, Wien, it was written in 1917 by someone named Szynski, a lawyer, and it's become sort of the anthem of Vienna, and it's his Opus 1, number 1. And I think he could have retired. If he'd been ASCAP, then he could have retired.
Mein Herz und mein Sinn schärft stets nur für wen wie es weint, wie es naht. Da bin ich zu Haus, da kenn ich mich aus, und Tag und noch mehr bei der Nacht. Wo keiner ist kalt, ob jung oder alt, und da will wie es Glückliches kennt. Muss ich einmal fort von den schönen Ort, da nehm meine Sehnsucht kein End. Dann hört ich aus weiter Fern ein Lied, es klingt und singt, es lobt und singt. Wien, nur du allein, soll stets die Stadt meiner Träume sein. Dort, wo die alten Häuser stehen, dort, wo die lieblichen Mädchen gehen. Wien, nur du allein, soll stets die Stadt meiner Träume sein. Dort, wo ich glücklich und selig bin, wo es Wien ist, Wien, meine Wien. Ob ich will oder nicht, nun hoff ich recht spät, muss ich einmal fort von der Welt. Geschieden muss sein von Liebe und Wein, aber alles, wie's kommt, doch vergeht. Ach, das wird ganz schön, ich brauch ja nicht zu gehen, ich stand doch im Himmel hinauf. Da setz ich mich hin, schau runter auf Wien, der Steffen, da grüß ich davon. Dann hört ich aus weiter Ferne ein Lied, das klingt und singt, das lobt und singt. Wien, nur du allein, soll stets die Stadt meiner Träume sein. Dort, wo die alten Häuser stehen, dort, wo die lieblichen Mädchen gehen. Wien, nur du allein, soll stets die Stadt meiner Träume sein. Dort, wo ich glücklich und selig bin, ist Wien, meine Wien.
So this is a poem by Alan Seeger. He was the uncle of Pete Seeger. And he graduated from Harvard, he lived in the village, he decided he wanted to live in Paris, and when he got to Paris, he wanted to enlist in the army, but America wasn't in the war in 1916. So he joined the Foreign Legion, which a lot of patriotic people did when they couldn't join the French army or the American army wasn't there. And he was killed, and there is a monument in France to all these men who served in the Legion and were killed. So this was ironically, this is supposedly a favorite poem of John Kennedy, which Jackie knew by heart. Rendezvous. I have a rendezvous with death at some disputed barricade. When spring comes back with rustling shade and apple blossoms fill the air, I have a rendezvous with death when spring brings back blue days and fair. It may be he shall take my hand and lead me into his dark land and close my eyes and quench my breath. It may be I shall pass him still. I have a rendezvous with death on some scarred slope of battered hill when spring comes round again this year and the first meadow flowers appear. God knows 'twere better to be deep pillowed in silk and scented down, where love throbs out in blissful sleep, pulse nigh to pulse and breath to breath, where hushed awakenings are dear. But I've a rendezvous with death at midnight in some flaming town, when spring trips north again this year, and I to my pledged word am true. I shall not fail that rendezvous.
old campground. Heading tonight, heading on the old campground. For it's far to run, the flag was running on the flag, shouting the battle cry of freedom.
Caroline stayed home, but he was very patriotic.
In Flanders Fields, the poppies blow between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place. And in the sky, the larks still bravely singing fly, scarce heard amidst the clouds below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved. And now we lie in Flanders Fields. Day on, I walk with my friend. To you, for falling hands we pray. Father, touch me not to hold it high. If ye break with us who die, we shall not sleep, nor the poppies grow in Flanders Fields.
I was going to read this great thing by Edith Wharton, and we're out of time. So, but I think we should. Oh, then I will read it.
Okay.
Edith Wharton was another one of those people that you never would have expected to be. Made a tremendous effort in the war, and she was given the Légion d'honneur because in the beginning of the war, she helped with the refugees from Belgium. She got them clothing. She had clothing made for them. She found a place in the state, etc., etc. And she wrote 2 very interesting books about the war. So this is from her biography. Oh. Some 3 months later, on a hushed November day, another unwanted sound called me to the same balcony. The quarter I lived in was so quiet in those days that except for the crash of aerial battles, few sounds disturbed it. But now I was startled to hear, at an unusual hour, the familiar bell of our nearest church, Sainte Clotilde. I went to the balcony and all the household followed me. Through the deep expectant hush we heard, one after another, the bells of Paris calling to each other. First those of our own quarter, Saint-Thomas d'Aquin, Saint-Louis des Invalides, Saint-François Xavier, Saint-Sulpice, Saint-Étienne-du-Mont, Saint-Séverin, then others, more distant, joining in from all around the city's great periphery, from Notre Dame to the Sacré-Cœur, from the Madeleine to Saint-Augustin, from Saint-Louis-en-Ile to Notre Dame de Passy. At first, as it seemed, softly, questioningly, almost incredulously, then with a gathering rush of sound and speed, precipitately, exultantly, till all their voices met and mingled in a crash of triumph. We had fared so long on the thin diet of hope deferred that for a moment or two our hearts wavered and doubted. Then, like the bells, they swelled to bursting, and we knew the war was over. So we're going to end with a little song, and we're all going to sing, and because we are. Oh, this is really bad thing. Oh, I'm sorry. So, this is how it's going to go. We have the words in here. I'm going to sing the verse, and then you're all going to sing the chorus. Okay.
Up to mighty London came an Irishman one day. As the words were favorite culture, everyone was gay, singing songs of Piccadilly, Strand and Leicester Square. Till Paddy got excited and he shouted to them there, "It's a long way to Tipperary, it's a long way to go. It's a long way to Tipperary, and the sweetest girl I know. Goodbye to Piccadilly, farewell Leicester Square. It's a long, long way to Tipperary, but my heart's right there." Paddy wrote a letter to his Irish Molly, saying, "If you don't receive it, write and let me know. If there are mistakes in spelling, my dear," said he, "remember it's the Ken that's fair, don't put the blame on me. It's a long way to Tipperary, it's a long way to go. It's a long way to Tipperary, and the sweetest girl I know. Goodbye, Piccadilly, farewell Leicester Square. It's a long, long way to Tipperary, but my heart's right there."
After I thank them. Okay, after.
Oh, thank you so much.
One for each.